Hey, everybody, this is the Missing Wolfie from Reading with Beverly Wolfie. Um, I hope this isn't going to be running slow. I just made it here on time. I'm on Benadryl, and I'm with this because I've got a cold. I've got a cold, or it's the tail end of the flu. I don't know what's going on. But we are here today to talk about the Little House on the Prairie books because there's a lot of misunderstandings about whether they're factual or fictional. And it's a combination of both. Hi, Shelley. Hi, Shelley. How are you, honey? Heather. Hey, Mary Jane. Thank you for being here. Now, I've brought along this book, Pioneer Girl, Laura Ingalls Wilder, the annotated autobiography. Now, hi, Ashley. I can't read this. For one thing, there's so many footnotes and subnotes and all kinds of stuff in there, but it is a good reference novel. And I haven't well, it's not it's a reference book. Excuse me. Hi, Mississippi Mimi. Excuse me, folks. I'm having a really rough time with my nose today. My laptop decided, I know, it's a great book. Hi, Happy Nanny. My laptop didn't want to boot up. I was just having all kinds of problems. I didn't think I was going to make it here. Now, this book, I haven't read it all yet, okay? But there are some stuff in here, like this tells the true stuff. A lot of the Little House on the Prairie books were changed, right? Like, for instance, what was I looking at earlier? Now, I haven't read the whole book, but I did bookmark this one spot. Do you remember The Long Winter? I know. Remember in The Long Winter? The Long Winter is the one that drives me nuts the most because there's so many things, right? Hey, Lou. Hi, Dallas. You and Mary Jane, neither one of you are feeling very well, so just relax and enjoy, and I will do my best, okay? Now, everybody remembers The Long Winter and how it started off with an October blizzard, right? Like in the shanty, and the tar paper got torn off because remember, those shanties were just boards and batten and tar paper. They were not built for zero weather. Oh, wait a second. All right, Suburban, I'm going to make you a moderator, so you're going to have to come back in. All right, there you go. Hi, Becky. Yeah, it's coming and going. So anyway, and I've put the dogs down for a nap so that I don't get disrupted. Okay, so in this book, it said the storm was always called the October blizzard because you remember the cows their faces had frozen their own breath. They were smothered in their own breath because it was freezing. Hundreds of cattle perished in it, and some of the people were frozen to death. Okay, now that was the blizzard that then. That was a blizzard. And then when it was all over and Ma kept saying, oh, I should have the books here, shouldn't I? I've never seen such, but I've never seen you so worried. And they were talking about the muskrat house and how he was showing Laura that, the muskrat, he's never seen a muskrat house that big or that thick or that well built for winter. And it made him uneasy. Right. And made Laura uneasy too. Whereas Caroline was an Eastern woman. Okay, what a lot of people don't know is that she considered marrying below herself, really, if you think about it. But oh, by the way, Charles Ingalls and I share the same birthday. We're both January 10th. Anyway, She said, "Oh, you're worrying. I've never seen such a beautiful weather. It was just that one uncommon storm." And then he went to town and he got the message from the Indian or the indigenous person, whatever. But here it says Indian. An old Indian. Okay. There would be heap big snow and the winds would blow and blow. This American Indian man came to town specifically to warn people about the coming winter. This occurrence was not without precedent. The Redwood Gazette had reported two similar instances in 1878 in January. Joe Connell, half-breed, who has lived. What the Indian, I'm sorry, that was the more of the other stuff. The Indian specifically came because the story was, and I read it in here, is that they had nice winters, but every seventh winter, it got bad. And then the cycle repeated itself. But each seventh winter got worse than the seventh winter before. And this was the third set of 7 winters. And he said it was going to be a really bad 7 months of storms and all that stuff. So when Charles got back to the shanty, he said, "Nope." And she said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Not a thing is wrong, but we're moving to town." And then, of course, he tried to explain what the Indian had said, but Carolyn wouldn't really listen because she was like, about Indians, right? And that is the reason. Okay. Now, yeah, hit live chat, folks, and put all questions in capital letters so that I will see them better. So I noticed one thing about Charles, like when he was saying, "Oh, we're going to made a bet with Uncle Sam." I don't want to think about it as gambling, Charles. But he never argued with her when she gave these off-colored opinions. He just said, "Well, there's something to be said for everything," kind of thing. And he just let it go. Ow, my bum. Oh, sorry about that. So when they went to town, okay, now one thing they mention in the actual book was that when that blizzard happened in October, that stopped the trains. The blizzard stopped the trains, had to be dug out, and then it could come. So their thought process was moving to town where they would have the store building he built was in better condition for sub-zero weather. And back then they didn't insulate, right? But there was also the fact that he said, "We'll be in town where we can get our hands on everything, where we can get coal from the lumber yard, and we'll always keep enough coal to outlast any blizzard." Now, folks, this is the long winter. I'm reading it again right now. Makes me grind my teeth. Okay, because there's so many things that they just should have used that common sense would have solved a lot of problems. Okay, for instance, when he went to town, when he came back and said, "Okay, we're moving to town where we can be sure of getting coal from the lumber yard and food and all that stuff," nobody thought. One blizzard shut the trains down. They were just told they were going to have 7 months of blizzards. The worst blizzards in over 20 years were going to be seen in almost 30 years. But they're only going to keep enough coal in their house to outlast one blizzard at a time. Think, if the trains get stopped, you're not going to get any more food. You're not going to get any more coal. That's when they should have been prepping. I thought about that. Drove me crazy. Listen to your guts. Well, the muskrats are building up. The house, I've never seen it so big, so thick. The geese and the ducks were flying so high and so fast they didn't even stop because they wanted to get south. All the animals, all the weather was telling them, "Folks, it's going to be a really crappy winter." and they didn't use their heads, right? They didn't use their heads. So when the trains got shut down, also the 7-year reference. Well, they didn't. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to go get the books, okay? I've got fresh data, so we can talk for a good hour at least. All right. Sorry, folks. I should have been better prepared. We may want to do more than one live stream of this. We may want to talk about one book at a time. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome, Dallas. Okay. Hi, Jody Bean. Okay. Now, let me. All right. Okay, now I'm looking at the book. And they're talking about that. And that's another thing that drove me nuts. Mary was like, "Oh, it's just probably one of Laura's queer ideas." Like Laura would tell the truth. And then whenever she contradicted, they'd say, "Oh, don't contradict." But Mary was constantly caught. She was blind, but she was the best looked after member of that entire family. One of my dogs has been very sick, and we had a pack of coyotes in the yard night before. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, coyotes are really bad this year. Pa never prepped for much, taking his family from pillar to post, putting them through hardships to serve his own desires. Exactly. Okay, here's Pa. He said this was after the blizzard, okay? He said, "I don't like it. I don't like the feel of the weather. There's something. I don't like it. I don't like it at all." And Mom was saying, it's going to be a hard winter. The hardest we ever saw, said Pa. "Why, Charles, we're having fine weather now." That one early storm is no reason why the whole winter will be bad. Okay. Yes, it is. A 3-day blizzard that blocked trains in October. And they had just done the harvest, which was not much. They had just done the harvest. This is where she made the green pumpkin pie. Hang on a second. Fall of the year. Sorry, folks, if I'm just trying to. Okay. This is what they harvested that year. A lot of digging for a few potatoes. 5 sacks. Now, a sack is probably like a 50-pound size bag. Okay. 5 sacks of potatoes. Or 5 bushels of potatoes. They got almost a bushel of beans. They got 2 quarts of green tomato pickles and 1 gallon of tomato preserves. And they got like 4 or 5 pumpkins. Like they really didn't have a lot. So When the blizzard came and it stopped the trains, wouldn't you have said, okay, we're moving to town? Wouldn't you have thought about, I would have thought about that. I'm sorry. I and that's another thing. Um, when they would like, oh, buy flour, go to buy flour in town, and they had saved up all this money from when they were taking boarders and feeding them on the surveyor's dollar, right? No, it wasn't much food at all. They had they had like navy beans. They had 5 bushels of potatoes, maybe 5 pumpkins, and they had the cow and the calf. Okay, this is what another thing that makes me crazy. People were once the blizzard started, it stopped the trains almost permanently. And when they stopped the trains permanently, Charles had gone to town to get news in between blizzards and came back with 4 pounds of ox, because one of the store owners had butchered his oxen and sold it all for 25 cents a pound, bone down to the bones and grizzle. So he spent $1. Now I know that's a day's pay for 4 pounds of meat back then. That's a good day's pay. But I know they had, and there's something, but they had like 40 some dollars just from when they were keeping boarders. Okay. I'm sorry, but there's no firewood. I would have filled that lean-to with coal. I would have filled that lean-to with coal, and I would have emptied the store. I would have spent every last penny I had getting that being stocked up. Well, yeah, but I mean, when they were lived in Minnesota, where was Wisconsin was Plum Creek, right? Plum Creek wasn't that great, and Pa had an itchy foot. He was constantly dragging them around pillars to post. Oh, well, that's another thing too. Mississippi Mimi, you would have starved on what they call normal. I was talking to Howie about this last night when we went to bed. They lived, for the most part, when they weren't able to raise their own food yet, because every time they moved, they had to start from scratch again. They lived on salt pork, potatoes, beans, bread, and cornmeal, and tea and coffee and sugar. It's like, and butter, whatever they could get from their cow, milk and butter for if they could get it from their cow. A diet like that would kill us today. But back then, they didn't have a lot of preservatives. And you know what salt pork was, eh? It was the fat back. There was almost no meat on it. It was basically pickled fat. And I'm going to sneeze. They basically, and how could they eat? Like they excuse me, they ate salt pork and potatoes and beans almost every day. I mean, the diet was very confined and unvarying. Thank you, Dallas. But today, back then, they worked their asses off. Okay. And most of their food was from scratch, simple, and preservative free. They could live like that. And they could, because they lived and they ate like they worked really hard. I mean, did they all have diabetes, Happy Nanny? I haven't gotten through all the way through the book yet. I know that Carrie became, like, I think it was a newspaper editor, or she ended up working for a newspaper. And must have been some gassy folks. Well, you never hear about that. You never hear about outhouses either. Excuse me. So anyway, when the trains are all stopped and there's no more coal, and Charles comes home and says, "Oh, here's 4 pounds of beef," and she's, "Oh, I can make that last a week." for flavoring and stuff, sear it all over and pot roast it. I'm sorry, folks. I would have seared it all over, sliced it up, and made the biggest pot of soup I could get, and I would make that soup stretch. I would just throw a little bit of this in, a little bit of that in every day. And if the soup got a little thinner, fine. But my thing was, I didn't know they all died from complications of diabetes. Huh. But anyway, and if he heard, and that's when he tells them the trains are no longer running. There's not going to be any more trains that winter. And he only comes home with 4 pounds of meat that he paid $1 for. And I know for a fact he had at least $40. Sorry, folks. I would have stocked up. I would have bought the store out with coal and food. Okay. So, but then there comes the point when Charles basically goes and steals a bucket of Almanzo Wilder's seed grain, and he didn't tell anybody else where he got it. And Almanzo and Cap Garland did go for the 62 bushel bags of wheat. But think about something here, folks. Like, before they got that wheat, Laura asked her mother, "Ma, will we starve?" Because she got sick and tired. She complained once because they were eating sourdough bread that they made from ground wheat, and that's all they were living on. Tea and sourdough whole grain bread. They had a cow and a yearling calf in the barn. Kill the cat to eat. That's right, man. That little heifer calf would have been the first thing to go, because she wouldn't have been old enough to breed that year, right? Or maybe she would have, but I'm telling you, it's one less animal to feed and provide water for. The cow was dry, so how was the heifer calf eating, right? I'd have butchered that heifer calf, man, and I wouldn't have told anybody, and I would have hung it in the lean-to. Boom, bing, bang, boom. Meat for the winter, real quiet. And you know what? You could share if you wanted to. I have not read Prairie Fires. Could the reason he didn't stock up because he wasn't? Well, the thing is, no, Halo. Could the reason be he didn't stock up because there wasn't much left at the store? That's true when he got the meat. But after the October blizzard, when they moved to town and the trains came, that should have been the Muskrat House, the October blizzard, and the Indian warning should have been enough, would have had me scuttling under cover. And the first thing I would have butchered would have been the heifer calf. Yeah, it would have been a veal. It would have been veal. But I bet you would have got 150 pounds of meat out of it. He was a very selfish man. I've read these books with my kids and grandkids. All of them had mentioned to some degree how Pa wasn't a great dad. Now, he was a good dad. He just wasn't a great provider. Like, he'd rather hold on to $40. Now, again, that's like, a month and a half pay. But you've seen me go to Costco before winter, folks. I spend almost, I spend a half a month's pay for the winter, and that's not what we've raised or gotten from the farmer's market. Exactly, Melissa. Could have butchered the cow and sold it and bought 2 more after the blizzard. But he hung on to the cow. Well, yeah, exactly. And he hung on to the cow because she would provide milk next year. But guess what? That's a lot of hay and water to keep getting milk. Yes, milk was kind of important, but not as important as living on tea and bread. And the milk dried up because he couldn't look after the cow. He couldn't get her regular water. He couldn't milk her often enough. So, I mean, you look at them back and, excuse me, folks, I don't smoke cigarettes. I smoke medication, for those of you who may be new. When they were in the little house in the big woods, okay, he got 2 deer every year. And I mean, yes, they were he didn't like the fact that he had to grub around. They had to clear the land because they lived in the woods of Minnesota. And you had to grub out, sprouting trees and stuff to get crops in and all that stuff. But they were well fed. They had a hog every year. They had 2 deer. They had pumpkins and everything from the garden. They had butter. They had cheese. Pa wanted to move. But I get it. I understand things were feeling too crowded, but why are you a bad girl? Okay, so let's also talk about some of the things that are not necessarily. Oh, here's another thing. Everybody who cries over Jack dying at Plum Creek when he's old before they move to Silver Lake, Jack did not die there. Jack did not stay with them until he died. He wanted money. He put money over, I don't know. But Jack, when they sold, if you remember on the banks of Plum Creek, when they traded their wagon cover and wagon bows, their 2 horses and their little mule for the land and the oxen and all that stuff, Jack did not stay with them. Jack had an even itchier foot than Pa. When the wagon cover and the bows and the horses went on Mr. Hanson's or Nelson's or whatever his name is, Mr. Hanson's wagon, Jack followed that wagon and went left. He never came back. So Jack did not die old and alone and on a blanket. That was just added for that. There's also something. Well, Mary Jane, do me a favor and the TV version really, other than some names and a few incidences that they built on, it really had nothing to do with the books, really. It was based on loosely, and I mean very loosely. And then when you think that the books are based loosely, well, not too loosely, but based on Laura Ingalls' life, but they were changed in some parts, fictionalized to make the story more palatable to children and to make the stories flow better. For instance, Jack not dying. Okay. And also what you don't know is in the long winter, they actually had someone living with them in the long winter. She was a friend of a friend from Walnut Grove. Okay. A guy came out there from Walnut Grove and he was married and he asked Mom and Pa, could his wife Maggie stay with them? And because they were friends of the family, she said yes, because they didn't want to put her out in the cold while he went and did his thing or whatever the case was. Thing is the reason she stayed with them is because his family didn't want her while he went out to build a homestead, because she got pregnant before they got married, and it was obvious. And she didn't want to have the baby at home and shame her parents. So she actually stayed with the Ingalls throughout the long winter. But they didn't put that in the story. They were going to put it as Mr. and Mrs. Boast and that, but it didn't flow right. So they just left that out entirely. There were also 2 more members of Almanzo Wilder's family. There wasn't 4 kids. There was 6. So Uh, Jack is the dog. Yes, Kathy D. Jack is the dog, the brindle bulldog, and he did not die in Plum Creek. He went on with the man they sold the horses and the wagon cover and the wagon bows to. He left with that wagon and those horses. He just said, "I'm not staying with you guys. I'm not done traveling." And Jack left with the guy they sold the horses to. So, oh, you keep seeing Michael Landon. Yeah. I used to watch Little House on the Prairie, and it was after school. Like, come on, I got two channels. I got Global on Checks, and Little House on the Prairie was an after school thing. But my father, every time the do 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 came on, and Laura was running down the hill and all that stuff, my father would say, "What's Charlie gonna cry about today?" Because he just hated the series Little House on the Prairie. He hated it, but I couldn't watch it today if you paid me because I've read so many of the books. Yeah, Dad would say, "What's Charlie gonna cry about today?" I have complete seasons on DVD, 1 to 4. Oh, I can't watch them. I can't watch them, not after reading the books and then getting more in depth with the actual autobiography. Um, I think okay, now I'm gonna look at when they were in Missouri. Do you remember how they went out and then they ended up saying, "Oh, they've got to they had to leave because they were too far into Indian territory and it wasn't legally opened up yet"? Iowa, Dakota Territory. No, 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 no. Kansas and Missouri, 1869 to 1871. Now, where is that? What page is that? This is the contents. Da, 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 da. Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay. In March 1871, this is when they were in Indian Territory, okay? And got the wrong glasses on for this. The Osages, now please forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, pronouncing it wrong, returned from their buffalo hunt. Although most of them went directly from their hunting grounds to their new reserve in what is now Oklahoma, others returned to Kansas to salvage what they could of their possessions. Since the Ingalls family lived on a well-traveled Indian trail, it is possible that Wilder's memories stem from this slice of history. On the other hand, in August 1870 or later that fall, Indian agent Isaac Gibson had led small parties of Osages from Kansas route that would have passed in close proximity to Ingalls' claim. I forget what I was going for. What I was going for was I don't think that she was actually there for the Trail of Tears that they described, but they had actually been there before when Laura was the infant. But that's not recorded. It's not recorded because she doesn't remember it. Cannot watch it now. Silly, because it's a good family show. But after reading the books again as an adult, I couldn't go back. I totally agree. I totally agree. On any TV show, they do a lot of editing. Oh yeah, the autobiography goes into much, much more detail about the things they put in the books and the things they left out and the things that were fictionalized and the things that weren't. The Little House on the Prairie books are based on Laura Ingalls Wilder's life, based on, but some things were changed to make them more readable. This is called Laura Ingalls Wilder, Pioneer Girl, the annotated autobiography, and it is fully loaded with information. Um, Pioneer Girl is a first and a last. The publication of Laura Ingalls Wilder's initial attempt at writing her life story, and it is her last book-length manuscript to see print. The debut of this carefully researched and annotated edition is a literary event, a fresh book at the pioneering experience, and a fine counterpoint to the classic Little House series. Now, so this is where you're going to get all your facts. And these are fact versus, I'm going to say 80, 90% fact. And then there's like probably 10% of things that have been smooshed and fictionalized and stuff like that. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So there's a lot of things, like, for instance, like I'm one of those people, okay? I've been reading my whole life. Like I started kindergarten knowing Dick and Jane. It's that simple. I mean, I came from a long line of readers, right? So no one, that's right. She tried to have it published before her books, but no one would publish it because it was too dry. It, you know, that it needed more get up and go kind of thing. Oh, I wanted her to punch Nellie Olson in the face. Oh, I wanted her to punch her in the books. She was a nasty little crapper. But, and what thing that gets me is her mother in the book was a very nice lady. Very nice lady. In the series, she's just a, you know, a twat waffle. She's so mean. Her mother, Nellie Olson's mother. But so you don't see her much. So what was I trying to think of? Oh, like let's talk about Almanzo Wilder and Farmer Boy. And I'm really glad that that she wrote Farmer Boy, because you saw how Almanzo was raised. What, twat waffle? That's the nicest thing I could think of to say that wasn't inflammatory, insulting to anybody but Nellie Olson. We all have a Nellie Olson that we come across in life. And I just tried to get away from them as fast as possible. But what was I going to say? Because I got distracted. Oh, Almanzo Wilder. You read that book, okay? The Farmer Boy. And I think one of the reasons that he had an older sister that was named Laura Wilder, and he had a younger brother. I don't know what his name was, but Almanzo was not the youngest. Okay. And his brother Royal was not the oldest, his sister. So there was actually 6 kids. And that's why you think about how much food they would prepare, because he's talking about, you know, pies and breads and all this stuff on a Saturday baking. There's like 5 pies and there's like 6 loaves of bread and there's 4 cakes and jars of donuts and cookies and all these things. And you think, wow. And then you think everybody else, but I think his oldest sister must have, I haven't looked it up yet, but his older sister must have already been moved out. And I don't know about Pearly. Thank you, Mississippi Mimi. Pearly was his younger brother. Oh, Farmer Boy, I know. And that's where I learned about apples and onions. Like I've been to Cracker Barrel and tried their apples and onions, and it's disgusting because they use pie filling. Fried apples and onions. If you look at our half acre homestead and you put apples and onions in the search bar below the main thing, you'll find that I've worked with that, and it is one of my favorite things to eat with pork. Like I think that's where applesauce and pork started, like pork chops and applesauce. Oh, I've already got spaghetti in the crock pot for supper, but I think I will make some apples and onions and fried pork chops tomorrow. And do a video and show you that how I do it. But I think Laura was hyper vigilant about a lot of things because Mary was always Miss Prim and Proper, and she even admits it later on when she goes away to college in the book that she said, "You must have wanted to slap me so much." And Laura's like, "No," right? But Laura's like, "You think about this." Pa says, "Well, your mom wanted one of you to be a school teacher, and Mary was wanted to be a school teacher, but now she's blind, so you have to be a school teacher." She didn't want to be a school teacher. She wanted you, right? And so did Ma and Pa adopt a brother? No, they did not. They actually did have a baby boy, but I believe it was between Laura and Carrie. But he died as a failure to thrive, which back nowadays we know is usually cystic fibrosis. Um, okay, Cracker Barrel. Well, I'm not fond of the Cracker Barrel. I'm really not. And that's just me because it's not got anything really to do with the food. What it has to do with walking through the store to get to the food. I am just battered by smells of candles and things, and it upsets my stomach. So that by the time I get to the food, all I can taste is scented candles. I went to Mansfield, Missouri, to Laura and Almanzo Wilder's. That would be their last home. Beautiful but small, lots of land, but I thought it was awesome. Her daughter Rose built her a rock house next to it. Yeah, Charles Jr., but he died as an infant. So we you don't they don't necessarily they don't bring it. And that's another thing. Just a new book opens and there's another baby. They don't tell what Ma went through. They don't tell, who dies or whatever. But if you look at Laura, Laura is a typical middle child. She feels responsible for everybody, right? So yeah, she went to school, and can you imagine being upset if your school marks fell below 100? I wanted to be a teacher because of the TV shows, so I did, and I hated it. Then read the real books and found out that she didn't want to do it. She lost a child after Rose, and she didn't lose him in utero. She lost him. I think it was diphtheria. I'm not sure. Like they say that they got scarlet fever, and that's why Mary went blind. Now, in the TV series, it took her a long time to go blind. In reality, she went blind over a couple of weeks. They're now saying it might not have been scarlet fever, it might have been meningitis. They just didn't know the difference back then. And yes, Laura had a boy and a baby boy after Rose, and he died, and they never had any more children. Now they never say if that's because I'm pretty sure the love didn't die because they really did love each other deeply right to the end of their lives. So isn't it ironic? Caroline, Laura, and Rose all lost boys. Caroline, Laura, and Rose. I didn't know Rose lost a boy. I didn't know that. Well, there was, yes, life was hard back then. People couldn't have, there was a movie we watched not that long ago with Tommy Lee Jones and Hilary Swank. And she was a spinster and she was always trying to find someone local to marry her so they could put their lands together and blah, 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 blah. I forget what the movie's called, but what happened was she ended up going with Tommy Lee Jones to take three insane women back east to be looked after in a home because women went friggin' crazy. You talk about wartime, mail order brides and stuff like that. Man, oh man, it wasn't as all love and roses. Like, mail order brides would get out there and, one woman slept with her, brought her mother along and slept with her mother to try and keep him away from her. And it didn't matter where she was. She was, she could be laying next to her mother and he would bang her saying, I'm going to get you pregnant. Right. And women would have baby after baby and they would go crazy. Right. And this movie was all about, these women who just couldn't handle the pioneer life and went. And Hilary Swank herself, halfway through or near the end of the movie, actually died. Like she killed herself. So, I mean, The Homesman. Thank you, Shelley. It's called The Homesman, and I think it may be on Netflix, but that gives you a pretty clear picture of what it was like to try and homestead in Kansas. Kansas is I would love to see Kansas, but by all accounts, it was the worst state to tame because of the tornadoes, because of the weather, and it was so flat, and it was just horrible. Which book is that, Melissa? The Homesman? Oh, I'm going to have to look that up. It sounds like a good book. But yeah, women. So I guess everybody had their ways of holding on to their sanity. I mean, I'm pretty sure Laura's mother, her way of holding on to her sanity was to keep things civilized in her mind. Okay. You had to get up and get dressed every day. You had to go up that freezing ladder into the thing above, strip out of your clothes, get into your night clothes, and crawl into a bed when you can see ice coating the windows and stuff. Why the hell didn't they just put beds around the fire downstairs while it was really that cold? Like, seriously, dude. Why would you go upstairs to sleep when you're limited? Like they were doing these hay twist things later on when they ran out of coal. Why are you sending your children upstairs when it's like minus 40 and there's no heat up there and no insulation? But Caroline Ingalls I'm pretty sure held on to her sanity by being very rigid in certain things in her life. There were certain standards, no matter what you did, you had to keep them or all was lost. And what's the point of living if you don't have something to hang on to, I think. So that's why I think that I always saw Caroline Ingalls as very, very rigid. Very, very rigid. Frontier House, Grampy Campy. Did you ever see the PBS series Frontier House? No, I haven't. Oh, and the rodent problem. I have enough problems with mice now, but they didn't have Tupperware back then, right? Like, think of these whole cheeses sitting on the shelves in the pantry. No wonder we always say put a bit of cheese on the mousetrap. Okay, why I returned to school instead of getting a GED. I hated myself if I received a 98. My children could not understand me because I would be proud of a B from them. I had to explain I'm a 35-year. Okay. I hear to tell you firsthand that if you get meningitis, you pray to die. Oh, well. I don't know. But Laura and Charles were the only two that didn't get it. Baby Grace had it. Carrie had it. Or maybe it happened before Grace was born. I don't know. But I know Carrie had it and Mary had it and Ma had it. And if you remember in the long winter when Carrie was up at the blackboard, or I don't know if it was a little town on the prairie or whatever, but, Nellie Olson got in good with Almanzo Wilder's sister, who was the teacher. And she filled her head full of Laura Ingalls thinks her father runs the school because he's on the school board. All that stuff, right? But the truth was, oh my goodness. I forgot what I was saying. Oh, yeah. When Carrie was standing, she said, oh, well, you did it wrong. You sit down and you read yours. Carrie, you get up to the blackboard and you write those words you got wrong 50 times each. And Laura's like watching her go gray and starting to sway, please, and she had to put up her hand to be acknowledged that her sister was going to faint. Now, believe, I'm sorry, I've got to answer that. That's Howie. Okay, I'll do that after my live stream, honey. And I'll call you later at 3. So she had asked permission, but I'm thinking that the scarlet fever damaged Carrie's heart. Because I forget what I read once somewhere that if it damaged your heart, one of the first things is like the blood flow isn't right and you get headaches, and with that comes memory problems, and she was always very delicate. Oh, you spent over a week with isolation. Oh, yeah. Okay, Nicolas Cage. We know you're not Nicolas Cage, but if you're going to talk like that, my moderators are going to boot you out. So you either respect the people around or in the chat, or please just, thank you. I know there was a woman once who was plagued by migraines, and they got so bad she would be crawling under her desk at work. And it turned out it was a heart problem. So I think that Carrie's heart was damaged in the either meningitis or scarlet fever. So I wonder how Almanzo felt when Laura put Eliza in her books. He always knew Eliza was a bossy bit of goods, right? She always was. She was a lot like, Mary. It's like, oh, it's when she sees the shanty before the long winter, and it's black tar paper with lath holding it in place. And she goes, oh, it's tiger striped, the shanty, because it did look like a tiger to her. Mary goes, tigers are yellow with black stripes, not the other way around. She contradicted. Now, if Laura had said that, she would have gotten in trouble for contradicting. But everybody looked after Mary. Laura milked the cow, took them to water, picketed the animals out, did housework, trampled down hay. And if they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have survived that long winter burning hay. And all those things. And Mary was like, oh, I don't know why you'd want to do that. I don't know why you'd want to do that, And Mary always struck me as somebody who really worked at being good, as showing off how good she was. And it drove me crazy. And Almanzo, like, yeah, he never got along with Eliza, but he did get along with her later because of the stove polish brush in the parlor. And if you haven't read Farmer Boy, you'll see that. But he also knew what the truth was, right? So, I mean, I'm surprised they haven't banned the books, because they did a show in one of the books when they're with their winter socials. They did a show all in blackface. Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't taken that out of the book. This sanitization of history makes me crazy. They haven't taken Laura Engel's books off the shelves. They've just taken them away, her name off a prestigious children's literary award, because of the way her mother viewed Indians. And I'm pretty sure, doing a darky dance in blackface didn't help. So, if you're talking about the movie with the women and Hilary Swank and Tommy Lee Jones, who I still just love that rough, gruff old arsehole. It's called Homesman, and it's a really good movie if you can get your hands on it. Mary was treated like a princess. Plus, every time something happened, she couldn't move. Oh, I know. I mean, think about Laura pulling her away from the fireplace when she was holding Carrie in her lap, right? But Mary, because of Laura, and I mean, kids, they turned over their entire paychecks to the day they moved out. And that's something that was never understood. Oh, didn't know what. Grace's husband helped carve the president's heads on Mount Rushmore. Oh, wow. I can't wait to finish reading this book. Is it in this book? Eliza's son was close to Rose and Almanzo. Oh, really? The embarrassment to the family. I don't know what you meant by that. But it's true. I mean, Mary was treated like a princess. Every penny that Laura earned either went into the household or went into her sister's education. Right to the day she married and moved away. And she said, "Oh, I still got $15. I don't need it." And when I was growing up, when my brothers and sisters, like my eldest brother and my eldest sister, they're both like 11 and 14 years older than me. They were going to high school and then they worked nights and they turned their paychecks over to my mother. Now, I had no idea because my mother died when I was 9, long before I started earning. And after my mother died and my middle brother got a job, he would come home and put his paychecks in the kitchen drawer because he didn't know what to do with them. Dad, like he was giving them to my dad, but my dad's like, what? And even after we sold the house in Toronto and moved up to the house in Apsley, that we built in Apsley because of my dad's heart, my middle brother, who had quit his job at the factory and moved up with us to help build the house, he turned all of his unemployment insurance over to my dad right up until he left. So when I got my first paycheck, it was $16. I'll never forget, $16.11. Back then, or 1681, somewhere around there. I was 14, and back then the minimum wage for students, underage students, was $1.21 an hour, $2.11 an hour, somewhere around there. So my first paycheck was $16, and I remember going home and showing it to Dad. I was so proud because I had been working, babysitting, all these other things, but they were all cash jobs. This was my first paycheck. And so I showed it to my dad, and I was really proud. And he goes, well, he said, because he was on a disability pension, right? He said, because we're always so tight for money, and you're going to be one to buy lipstick and feminine things and that. He said, I'm not going to ask you for any of your paycheck. And I remember thinking, why the hell would you ask me for some of my paycheck? The entitlement generation was born. But after I was out of school, and when I moved back home, or I was living at Dad's, even if I only made $50 or $100, I paid my dad 25 cents or $25 a paycheck every week, even if I only made $150 a month. Because that I understood, room and board. But even my kids didn't really understand it, right? Like Arthur was living at his father's from the age of 14 to 18. And he graduated high school and he moved back home, and then he moved to the city. But for the summer, he came and lived with us in Wakefield while he went to work. And I told him if he was saving for an apartment or whatever, that was fine. I wasn't going to ask him for any money, right? But then I didn't see how much he actually ate. I mean, I give Howie 2 sandwiches and 2 pieces of fruit every day. Or like today, you got 2 sandwiches, a piece of chocolate cake, no frosting, and a banana. Okay. I would give Arthur the same thing and he would be starving because he was 18 and he was still growing and filling out. And he was working for a landscaper all day. So my food bill doubled almost because Arthur ate, I would have to make him 2 sandwiches, 2 muffins, 2 applesauce, 2 pieces of fruit. And then he'd come home and eat a full supper. So then I said to him, son, I'm going to have to ask you for $25 a week because you're eating more than we can. And I was working too. I was working at the bakery. I said, you're eating more than I can, afford. And he got upset. But I mean, when Briar came home, Briar's like, he's got a job. He couldn't figure out why I wanted him to pay room and board, just the way it works, right? I found it odd that they bought an organ with Laura's money, and it was for Mary. They bought Ma a sewing machine with Laura's money too. That's that little thing her last paycheck helped to pay for was the sewing machine. At 29, my son recently moved back home at 29 years old. My food bill has doubled and my cabinets need restocking. I know. But that's one of the things I always know now, that I always make care packages up for my kids. And Arthur and Mel are they do the farmers markets, and I got them a dehydrator for Christmas one year, and they're actually doing some canning now. So I think I'm going to be buying them a pressure canner for Christmas this year. So whereas Briar just, he'll eat really good if that's what's handy, but he's like, oh, that's easy, I'll eat that. But then he's a young bachelor, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things. It seemed that Laura was just as much responsible for the household finances, for the farm work, and for the household chores as her parents were. She helped both and went to school. Then she earned money. I mean, yes, Lou, she sacrificed the most out of the family. And you never hear her bitch about it. Except the one time when she said, I don't want to. In her brain, she's going, I don't want to teach school. I don't want to, but I must for Mary. I never understood that. And so the way I see it is, oh, and by the way, I did a survey one year on Facebook, and it was one of those, who is your doppelganger in history? Mine was Laura Ingalls Wilder. Isn't that wild? My doppelganger in history was Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's really you should have been my mother, but that's impossible because we're very close in age. Well, this is what people say, oh, you're so real, or you got common sense. You got to remember, my mother was the second youngest out of 13 children. She was born in 1929 at the beginning of the Great Depression. My father was born in 1926. Okay. His mother died when he was 9. His father became an alcoholic. And his brother was killed in World War II. His brother raised him until he went away to war, until Arthur, my dad's older brother, helped raise him after his mother died from the age of 9 to 16 until he went away to war, because his dad was lost. He was lost to the alcohol after his wife died. But my Uncle Art died when my dad was 16 in World War II, right? So my mom and dad saw hard times. Okay, they were raised in hard times. But a lot of times my grandmother Ironside, like my dad's mom, reminds me of Carolyn Ingalls. I never met her. All my grandmothers and my grandfathers died before I was born, except for my dad's father, who passed away when I was 7. But my dad's mother was the woman who the margarine was coming out, and it would come in a package, and you would have to work the color in. And my grandmother this is something I'll never forget my father saying, called it axle grease, and would not use margarine. They would use drippings from meat or butter, And if they couldn't afford butter and they didn't have drippings, they did without. She wouldn't put axle grease on bread. But my mother was the second youngest out of 13, and I'm the youngest out of 5. Okay. So yeah, I was born in 1964, but I was raised by parents who were raised in the Great Depression. And so I grew up with a lot of that, and then, when mom died and dad had his heart attack, we were on a budget constantly. I wouldn't know what to do with wealth. I do know what to do with a budget. That's just the way I was raised. They didn't really can back then. They did and they didn't. They salted down meat. They smoked meat. When she made a gallon of tomato preserves, those were sweet preserves. She preserved them with sugar. So what they did was they made things like I do, you just pour the boiling brine over the pickles, put the lid on and turn it upside down, or you put them in a crock, okay, a stone crock, and pickled them. So they were either pickled or preserved with sugar and salt. So no, that back then they didn't do a lot of home canning just then. Yeah, no, well, see, but mom did buy margarine. My mother bought margarine, but she had butter for dad. And then when dad had his heart attack, the doctors told him, oh, no, you shouldn't have butter. You need to have corn oil margarine. Let that sink in. Hydrogenated vegetable oil back then in the 70s was already genetically modified. The corn was, not to mention the hydrogenation process. Okay. So I'm really glad we had, I'm really okay, Lulu, take care. Got to get back to work. I'm getting back to work too. I love the fact that we could talk about the difference, the differences between fact and fiction with the Little House on the Prairie books. But if you really want the truth, and it's a heavy read, get Pioneer Girl, and no, nobody's paying me for this, the annotated autobiography. The editor was Pamela Smith Hill, but it's Laura Ingalls Wilder's annotated autobiography. Really good stuff. Okay. My mother-in-law made her children soaky coffee poured on bread for dinner. Wow. There you go. Okay, so it's been over an hour, and as you can tell by the chirping bird on my phone, Papa wants me to get my banking work done. So I'm going to say, maybe sometime we'll do another live stream and talk about the books we're reading. How about that? So maybe every once a month, because it takes me longer than a month to read a book. So maybe once a month, we can do a live chat and talk about the book we're reading. What do you think about that? I'm asking your opinion on that. Okay. I love you guys. And thanks again for the wonderful live stream. And we will be starting Anne of Green Gables, then Anne of Avonlea, and Anne's House of Dreams before the end of the month. All right. Take care. God bless. And if you're not subscribed to Reading with Beverly Wolfe, please subscribe and always share. Because, if you guys don't help me get the word out that there are free audiobooks to listen to, nobody's going to listen to them. All right. I love you guys. Take care. God bless. And I'm looking where to